Welcome or welcome back to the channel. As always, thank you for being here and striving with me to recognize and manifest the fact of the one humanity. This morning, I was reading a paper by Kyoko Morales, and the title of it is Individual Rights versus the Common Good, a case study on Japanese self-restraint or Jishuku and COVID-19. So it really inspired me to record this video and talk about this concept of Jishuku, or what they call self-restraint. The concept of Jishuku or self-restraint, I believe, can help us begin to bridge the gap between our more rugged individualism as expressed in the United States and in the West in general, and this idea of the common good. The author states that Jishuku originated in the 1980s, and it evolved from the more communitarianism that is associated with the East in general and Japan in particular. It is attributed to the Japanese response to disasters, natural disasters. And so what this concept of Jishuku does is, in the face of natural disasters, the entire country voluntarily participates in the suffering of the nation to benefit the common good. So one of the examples the author shares is in response to the 2011 Japanese earthquake and the rallying response. It wasn't just in response to the people who were directly impacted, but it extended to politicians who were running for office, who restrained from probably a greater advocacy than they would normally use in positioning themselves to run for office. It extended to musicians in terms of the types of music and the themes that they wanted to promote during this time. And they took upon themselves a responsibility, as people were recovering from the earthquake, to set the tone for a more positive atmosphere that would engender hope and lead to a better and quicker recovery. So I thought this idea was very fascinating because it's not how we often think about and talk about what it means to sacrifice for the common good, and how this can be a more positive approach, not just for the people we are helping, but for ourselves. I want to read a quote from the article, and the article will be posted below this video. The practice of self-restraint, Jishuku, has been formed and strengthened in Japan along with the disaster culture. Jishuku in Japanese literally means self, ji, abstention, shuku, which can be also translated in a Japanese context as self-control, voluntary restraint, self-censorship, and voluntary ban, among other terms. So I think it's really enlightening to approach it in that way when we think about the common good, when we think about supporting the common good, not as something that is imposed upon us from top down, but something that we can consciously and willfully and voluntarily subject ourselves to, not in the sense that we are losing anything, but that we gain something in the process of creating a more cohesive society, which is fundamental to any individual's own good. The individual really has no hope to exist, to strive for freedom, to better themselves. If we are in the midst of chaos, the individual is already lost. The way we tend to talk about and think about the common good in the United States creates this false antagonism between the individual's rights and the rights of the whole. Whereas I think what I really hear in the Jishuku idea is that the whole is the foundation for the individual. Really, I think we have to sort of flip the emphasis, because if we emphasize the common good first, what we're essentially saying is that we're creating an organized body in which the individual can thrive. If we lack the impetus to create the organized body, the individual is already lost. The individual can't survive absent the body, right? So for me, Jishuku is a way to reorient our minds to participate individually in the self-restraint that would permit the body as a whole to thrive. And we do this because increasingly we understand that it is the strength of the body, the organization of the body, the ability for the entire body or the common good to thrive that makes any of those possible for the individual. When I was teaching in the classroom, I was not a teacher who I didn't post classroom rules. My expectation is that we would learn and grow together and treat people decently, really just follow the golden rule. And if there needed to be something specifically that I address, I would do so as it arose in the classroom. But I remember distinctly having a conversation with one kid who was acting out, and I may have talked about this in another video. One thing that I remember coming up spontaneously in a conversation with him when he was really on one is I said, look, either you will control yourself or I will have to. And that's really how I think about how we move from a very individualistic to a more communitarian or common good oriented society. We have to have some checks and balances in place because unlike Japan, we are not yet mature enough in the United States to demonstrate that type of self-restraint that allows us to make decisions, to make sacrifices voluntarily for the common good. It is as if sometimes we don't even have a concept of the common good and how our contribution to the common good is really a contribution to ourselves. If the common good is not served, then all of this becomes chaos. And so while we are treading this new territory, while we are attempting to bridge the gap, I have to approach it, and I think that we all have to approach it in the sense that we are trying to balance these two competing human forces, right? The need to be part of something greater than ourselves and our desire to step forward as individuals. And for me, the student who was acting out, I don't have a problem with you being an individual, but you have to maintain a sense of the greater whole of which you are a part, which in this case happens to be the classroom. And if you fail to do that, then it is up to me as the leader of this classroom, as the conscience of this classroom, to draw the line. And I can do it with loving understanding, but believe you me, there will not be an opportunity for you to continue down the pathway that you have set out for yourself. That is not what freedom looks like. Not in the context of you as one part of this greater whole. And I think this is an important conversation as we think about, gun laws. There is this, sort of rabid individualism that keeps cropping up, saying you have no right to impose any laws on us at all. But the truth is, again, if we can step back and look at the proliferation of guns in our society and the impact that has had upon the body, meaning the entire nation, not even the entire nation, entire communities, if you want to keep it closer to home, to be able to live without fear, to go to school, to go to the grocery store, to not feel under threat driving down the road, where road rage has led to several killings, at least in my state, in recent months. So if the body is not allowed to thrive, if the body is not conditioned, meaning it has the structures and the laws in place that allow it to hold and be a container for individuals to live without fear, to live free from harm, to live in ways that allow them to further their own greatest and highest potential, then Jishuku has to become part of our own philosophy of life, because without the body, without the container, we know and realize the individual has no shot at obtaining the freedoms that it chooses. Namaste.